Welcome to the RocketPD Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Murray. I'm a longtime education journalist and co-founder of RocketPD, here to bring you real talk with educators confronting what's broken in America's schools and hopefully offering up some advice and solutions about how to help fix it. Whether you're out to engage families, center students in their learning, or empower teachers and staff, we're going to cover the gamut, giving you ideas and frameworks that you can start using today. So what do you say? Are you ready to launch? Then let's get into it.
By the way, I think, when you move to a point where education is indoctrination, you subvert the very intention of education as promoting, democracy.
You're listening to the voice of Dr. Sheldon Shelley Berman. Dr. Berman is a former school superintendent, author, and one of the nation's leading voices on student inclusion and social-emotional learning.
What motivated us was seeing that there were so many of our colleagues who were like superintendents who were being fired summarily by, when a new board would be elected, and they said, well, we want to take it in a different political direction.
On this episode of the RocketPD Podcast, I sit down with Dr. Berman for a timely conversation about what it really means to stand up for public education. We talk about the growing politicization of schools, the mischaracterization of vital practices like SEL, and why now, more than ever, educators need the tools and the language to reclaim the narrative about school.
Education should not be about politics. It should be about the well-being of students and put students at the center. And put actually our major focus should be on democracy and helping young people become democratic citizens.
Dr. Berman reminds us that this work isn't about ideology. It's about making sure every student feels safe, supported, and prepared for life beyond school. If you're a school or district leader navigating today's tough conversations, or if you simply want to build stronger, more supportive communities, this is an episode that you won't want to miss. Stick around. Hey, Shelley, it's great to have you. I know we've been talking a lot about just sort of the angst that's out there right now and the frustration that's out there right now from folks in public education. The rhetoric is hot, and it's not always necessarily positive. And I think a lot of folks have started to stand up to that and to say, hey, public schools are doing really good work. Why are we sort of the punching bags here? And how can we rewrite the story and kind of rewrite that rhetoric so that what we're talking about is the great things that public schools are doing as opposed to all the perceived negativity? And so I was happy to have you on because I know that you've been around the country talking about this very issue. The book has been out for a while now, and it's really started to create this groundswell, the call to courage, right? And what we're talking about is really getting people to stand up and to speak out against some of that negativity that's out there. So I was pleased to have you. Lavelle speaks highly of you, and I know you and Lavelle Brown co-wrote this book together. I wonder if we could just start by you telling me a little bit about the impetus for this, right? And then the conversations that have been taking place since you've been traveling around the country and talking about it.
Well, thanks, Corey, and thanks for enabling me to be on this call and to share some of this. Where we started, where Lavelle and I started with this, and actually it's been a concern of mine for a couple of years, is that we haven't, as educators, done a good job of communicating why we're doing the work we're doing and what it looks like. And so the characterizations of the work, whether that's equity, whether that's, inclusivity, the approaches around, our culturally responsive instruction, all of that has been misconstrued and misrepresented. And so one of the things that we clearly can do is reclaim that narrative. But we have to do it in a way that centers people on the values that we hold dear. I mean, we all want schools, for example, to be safe places. We want kids to feel like they belong, like they're valued. That's not just something that's a liberal thing or a progressive thing. It's not something that's Democratic or Republican or independent. It's really something that the vast majority of parents want. In fact, I can't think of a parent that doesn't want their child to feel that they belong. And yet, the key vehicles for belonging, for creating a sense of belonging, are all about the kinds of work that is done in social emotional learning. Now, whether you call it social emotional learning or well-being or mental health approaches, may differ depending on where you are in the country. But that work is really critical. But we haven't been good at talking about it. We haven't been good at saying, here is how we constructively create that sense of community in the classroom, where we bridge differences, where kids are taught to collaborate with others, to cooperate, to be respectful of others. Another key example is just the kind of value in teaching historical accuracy, the controversies around divisive concepts, and that I think 19 states have passed divisive concept laws, it sort of misconstrues the issue. There's an attack on education as being liberal or progressive, and that it's indoctrination and left-wing views. Well, that's really antithetical to what public education is about. I mean, public education is really about anti-indoctrination. It's about helping kids think independently, about enabling them to determine their own perspectives and to come to their own decisions and to look at multiple perspectives. So we want to avoid indoctrination, and what is out there is not, it's not left-wing indoctrination. It's now, the people are now promoting right-wing indoctrination. And neither are good, by the way. I think, when you move to a point where education is indoctrination, you subvert the very intention of education as promoting, democracy. So what motivated us was seeing that there were so many of our colleagues who were like superintendents who were being fired summarily by, when a new board would be elected, and they said, well, we want to take it in a different political direction. This education should not be about politics. It should be about the well-being of students and put students at the center, and put actually that our major focus should be on democracy and helping young people become democratic citizens.
I think anybody that is a champion for education or a supporter of public education is probably sitting here nodding their heads, idealistically, like, exactly, right? I mean, that is absolutely the truth. You can't argue it. And yet our system is fraught with politics. These things are flashpoints.
Mm-hmm.
How have we gotten to this point? And, what can educators who see it as you've described it do differently to rewrite that narrative?
Well, I think, let me answer the second piece of that and then go back to the why, the why we're in the position we're in. But I think the answer to your question is that we have to really understand our own values, understand why the work is important to us, and how it is influencing the development of our young people. And we have to be able to articulate that. Sometimes one of the things that I know about myself, I know about many other educators, is, we're here to, in general, we value common ground, and we want to de-escalate conflict. In general, educators are conflict avoidant. And so we don't want to get into arguments. And we see the kinds of tensions that have emerged in school board meetings, in schools all over the country. And we shy away. And that's the absolutely wrong response. The response is, to call individuals in rather than calling them out. You don't want to attack individuals, but at the same time, you want to be clear about our values. We want to be clear about the reasons we're doing things, and we want to explain those as carefully as possible. One of the things that's happened I've done a lot of work in social emotional learning. That's been an area of focus for me. And there have been a lot of analyses of why people have objected to social emotional learning and what are those objections, and then how do we counter it? And what has emerged is really the sense that, when people talk about SEL or social emotional learning, people don't necessarily understand what that means. And so we have to operationalize that for people. We have to give them a sense, no, this isn't grooming. No, this isn't mental health. That it is really about building a sense of community in the classroom. It's about giving young people important skills that will serve them throughout their life in terms of their relationships with others and their ability to work with others. It's that simple. And it creates a sense of well-being in the community. In the same way, that the issue of inclusion is another one that's become loaded because people see immediately inclusion as gender identity. This has been attacked. Inclusion has been attacked for, around the gender identity issues. And yet, what we have to realize, and I think, again, the vast majority of parents, the vast majority of educators agree that schools have to invite everybody. We don't have a choice. We can't kick kids out, and we can't kick parents out. And that we have to accept the individuals who come in our door, and we have to do the best job we can to educate them as well as we can. And that means that we want to include the wide diversity of people, and that we want to welcome them and honor them for who they are. That isn't our choices. We're not making those choices. Those are parent choices. Those are individual student choices. But whatever that choice is, schools need to be responsive to those choices. And so that's I think the heart of the work that we're trying to do, and Lavelle and I have been trying to do.
Really interesting. Well, this notion that a couple of things to unpack, like one is just definitions, right? I think a clear lack of definitions or a clear lack of, agreement on sort of terminology. People have different interpretations of what words mean. And I think what I'm hearing you say is at the end of the day, everybody really wants the same thing. In some respects, it's a moral imperative. In some respects, your point, school districts and schools, public schools in particular, don't really have a choice, right? They are there to serve the needs of the students and the families who are in their communities and in their care. And that requires them, just by virtue of their function, to look at this in a way that is going to say, what's the best thing that we can do for everybody that we need to service and achieve the things that we want them to achieve. So a student to move on to the next grade, a student to graduate, a student to go on to college and career or whatever it might be. How do we position them to do that? Right. So in some respects, the function of schools is, as you've described it, for whatever reason, it seems like the terminology just gets in the way.
Yeah. And, to some degree, it is also our lack of clarity. I mean, I think the work that Lavelle and I have been doing, and I've been doing, both of us have been doing around the country independently and together, is to say we can have the courage to articulate the values behind what we're doing, and to be really clear about those values, and to push back against the misinformation and disinformation that's out there, and that. But you have to be able to be willing to engage. You have to be able to enter the arena, and to not enter the arena with anger necessarily. I mean, we can be upset about things, but we have to enter the arena with a sense of both compassion, care for others, and just as we want to create inclusive schools, we want to create inclusive environments in our community. Now, not all individuals want to be inclusive, and not all individuals will always listen. There are those who hold adamantly to their views, and sometimes it's not about changing their mind, but it's about helping them understand why we're taking the actions we're taking and why it's of value and why we're going to continue to do that work. I mean, a classic example, and this is probably the most significant one, is around equity. And the distortions, the distortion is that pursuing equity in schools is giving advantage to some kids and disadvantage to others. And so it is disadvantaging white students, for example, because you're discriminating and giving advantage to those who may have been marginalized in the past. But the essence of equity isn't about discrimination or providing significant advantages to one or another. It's actually ensuring the success of every student. And when we get down to saying, the work we're doing is simply ensuring the success of every student, people say, yes, I want that. A good friend, Scott Menzel, who's the superintendent in Scottsdale.
Sure, I know Scott, yeah.
Has a great example. He said, when many people like you and I wear glasses, right? Well, you wouldn't assign the same prescription to every single student, every single individual. Everyone has an individual, need for different glasses. And so, it's the same thing in education. Some students need some things. Some students take a little longer and they need more support in some ways. Some students need more encouragement or more acceleration. It's looking at how we provide a supportive system for all individuals. And that's what equity is. And so we have to have the integrity to say, no, we don't want to talk about equity. It's not a good word any longer. It's not an acceptable word. We want to talk about equity, but we want to define it. And we want to talk about the practical implications for every student, that it's advantageous for every single student, not just for, some groups of students.
Well, let's say we've shifted the lens, right? And we can agree to terminology, right? The definitions, when you talk about it that way, it's difficult to even argue against it, right? To your point, we just want to do good by the people who are in our care. We want to make sure everybody has opportunity. That makes a lot of sense. And yet we have these discussions politically and in our society that would kind of get in the way of that. And we have probably a couple of different factions of people. We've got the folks who say, hey, I believe in this work. And I'm sure listening now, there are some folks who are saying, I absolutely believe in this work. Politically, it's difficult for me to kind of stick my neck out there and take this risk, this perceived risk. And then there are people on the other side of the fence who say, no, this is the time to stand up, if ever. Like, we need to talk about it more than ever before because of the lens through which public education in some respects has been viewed or talked about, and we need to correct that narrative or rewrite that narrative. So my question is, depending on what side you're on, right, how do you go about doing this? How do you get started in the work so that you can take it forward in a positive way and that you don't become, hopefully, the victim of political turmoil or flashpoint, whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's a good question, and what I would say, Corey, is it really depends on context. I live in Oregon right now. I can probably go into any school district and talk about equity or diversity or inclusion and feel quite accepted, even in many of the rural districts in Oregon that are much more conservative, because there's a certain context to that. If I'm in Texas, I'm in a very different situation, and I have to approach it differently. But it isn't about backing up and saying, I'm giving in, that I want to, and I've heard this from individuals, leaders who say, superintendents who say, I want to protect my kids. I'm not going to talk about these things. I don't want to have the federal government come down and investigate us. At some point we have to stand up for the work that we're doing. And, at times, and I hate to put it this way because it's been the case in my own career, I've had to put myself at risk to say, I'm going to stand up for this, even though it could cost me my job. Because it is a value that I hold, and I have to, I couldn't live with myself if I give up that value. I think we have to continue to do the good work, but we have to continue to explain why we're doing the good work and what it looks like and what are the implications. And that's what I started with. And I think whether you're in Texas or whether you're in Arkansas or whether you're in Florida, we have to begin to talk about why this work is important and why the values are important and what are our core purposes. Oftentimes we get tied up in refuting, if it's an attack on social emotional learning, we get, all the evidence, we put out all the evidence and we put out, why it works and then the other side puts out, well, we don't think it works. And here's, so it goes back and forth. But what we don't get to is, don't we want all kids to belong? Don't we want all kids to feel safe? And how do we get to that point? What are the kinds of things that we should do? But most important, I think we also need to say that, and I'm going to come back to this theme, that education is not about indoctrination, and that the accusations around left and right indoctrination are really inappropriate in education, and that we also have to be open to hearing all perspectives and inviting all cultures. We are a diverse society. We are diverse in terms of religion, in terms of race, in terms of gender identities. There is so much that value in that diversity. And we have to honor that diversity, and we have to continue to come back to that the thing that's so extraordinary about democracy in the United States is that it emerges out of diversity, that we're an example of a country where people can live with each other in spite of their differences and not feel, now we're really turning away from that. And I think the more we begin to say that, and the more we begin to say diversity is really critical to our growth, our intellectual growth, our emotional growth, our social growth, that the better off we're all going to be.
So opportunity for all, diversity as something that really is positive. I mean, let's face it, because it contributes to different perspectives. It contributes to our understanding of the world and different cultures. And then, of course, finding common ground where we can talk about the things that we actually all want, which in this case really is, the success of students and, by some large extension, actually, not just the success of students, but what that means for the success of our society in the long run. That's some pretty powerful stuff. And I'm going to ask you this. You've been around for a while. I mean, you've been a superintendent in multiple districts. You've been working with the AASA for a long time. You've written several books, and you've been all around the world talking on some of these topics. In the SEL game, even before, equity was a flashpoint and before DEI was a flashpoint, SEL's been a flashpoint. I mean, you've been dealing with this stuff for a while. Is this moment in time the most divisive moment in time that you can remember, or do these things happen in cycles?
I've seen other times that have been very divisive, but frankly, in I hate to say this, my education career stretches almost 5 decades, and I have yet to see anything as polarized as we are now. But there's a footnote to that. We are not really polarized. The population isn't polarized around education. What all the research that I've seen, for example, the recent research shows that 2/3 of the population, including the majority of Republicans or Republican-leaning individuals, believe that in culturally representative education, that we actually and promote diversity, that we should really promote and honor diversity. The vast majority of people support that. So what I would say is that there's a minority who have actually promoted disinformation and misinformation, and that those are individuals who are culpable for the kind of divisiveness we're currently experiencing. We shouldn't be demeaning each other. We should be listening to each other. We should be looking for, and one of the things we do in the book, and one of the things we do in our in the seminars that we've been offering, Lavelle and I, are tools, not only tools for communication and ways of framing, but also tools for changing the very nature of the dialogue, from moving from debate to dialogue. The debate is, there's always a winner. When you have a national debate, everybody says, who was the winner? Well, dialogue is not about winning. Dialogue is about finding common ground and finding common interests. And frankly, we need that not only in our schools, we need that in our legislatures in states, and we need that in Congress. We need the sense that there is compromise, that we have to listen to each other, we have to find common agreement, and bills need to be bipartisan in the sense that we are inclusive of all. So how do we create those environments, for example, in our school board meetings and in our decisions at a local level? Well, we have a number of tools around setting norms, around dialogue, and just around the way we frame issues and the way we bring people to the conversation and how we include them in the conversation. And those are key strategies. I mean, it takes some time to learn. It takes, some work to develop those and develop the cultures where people understand that this is not a place where we're going to hate each other, but this is a place where we're going to bring our perspectives and try to find common ground.
Shelley, that's really interesting. I know you mentioned the word tools, and I want to press on that for a second, because I think a lot of people who, are leaning into this conversation. I know there are a lot of people who are leaning in saying, I agree with what you're saying, but I don't have the tools. I know you and Lavelle this fall, and you've done it a couple times now and received some pretty good response to it, are doing a cohort. You're going to have different people from all over the country come together and talk about what we just described, but hopefully, I think, give them some of those tools.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about that experience. I know you did it last year, so what the reaction was and why you're doing it again and sort of where we go from here.
Well, we did this before the election, frankly, and now it's even more significant in terms of the divisiveness and the polarization that's taking place. And it's more urgent that we reclaim this narrative and that we look at how we build support for public education again, and actually confront the kinds of misinformation that's out there. So the seminar, in fact, is what we've done is it's a 5-session, 90-minute a session online seminar, and it was just an incredible experience. And what we try to cover is, first, what we have to come to understand is our own. What are the sources of our own courage? How do we come to face others in a way that is courageous, yet has integrity, and comes from a place of care, a place of our values. So we start with, looking at just the concept of courage and how we can be courageous in places. And at the same time, how we can work with others to not attack or accuse others. But then we actually move to some tools around how do we, for example, what's the kind of language we use when we're confronted with issues around gender identity in our schools? And how do we dissect that in a way so that we can respond without anger, without getting highly emotional, but at the same time with clarity and with a sense that we are willing to hear and we're willing to share and we're willing to speak about why the perspective that we bring to this is important. And at the same time, listen. Then there's a whole variety of tools that we work with as well. As I was just talking about, debate and dialogue. For example, working with our boards around just the understanding of debate and dialogue. Having principles that guide, when a board meeting takes place and you actually have norms and you clarify what those norms are, not only for yourself in terms of as a board member and as a superintendent interacting with the board, but for the public What are the norms of what we want to try to create as a community? And here are our norms. We're going to, here are the things that we're going to, if I'm the chair of the board, here's the places where I may stop you in your presentation because you're attacking others or demeaning others, and that's not appropriate here. You can criticize, you can, you can offer suggestions, offer ways of looking at it that are different than what we're seeing, and that's fine. But to demean people is not where we're going to go. So how do you frame those kinds of processes and diffuse the kinds of intensity that emerges and the other aspect is how do you build support? We can't do this alone. And we have to realize that our work as educators is not just educating students. It's really educating the entire community. And how do we refocus our work so that we're educating and our parents are on board, that our community is on board, and that they understand the reasons that we're doing what we're doing and what that looks like. Now, there are many examples. We have a colleague, Aaron Spence, who is now the superintendent of Loudoun County, and I often think he was one of the first to be attacked around CRT, the critical race theory. And he wrote this absolutely beautiful op-ed in the newspaper about why that we aren't teaching critical race theory, but we are honoring diversity, and we are honoring all students who come to us, and we do want all students to feel that they belong. And it diffused the tensions in the community in Virginia Beach in an extraordinary way. And he took that to Rotary Club, to the Chamber of Commerce, to parent meetings, and that's the kind of courage that we need to have. Is that we need to be out there, and we need to be communicating what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what value it has, not only for our students, but the values for our community as a whole, and the values for our democracy as a whole.
With a common set of norms, some common definitions, and some courage, it is possible to sort of rewrite that narrative. You just described it to a T with the situation with Dr. Spence. Shelley, I want to thank you for chatting with me about this topic. It's an important topic, and I appreciate the work that both you and Lavelle and other folks all around the country are doing to sort of change the narrative, to get people to common ground, to achieve, the end goal for everyone, which is inclusivity for students and, some of that opportunity for students. And so the book is called Call to Courage. If you haven't read it yet, Standing Up and Speaking Out Against the Assaults on Democracy, Educators, and Students in America's Schools. It's a great read, and I know that you all are looking forward to this event in the fall. If you're listening to this, I would suggest you go to RocketPD.com where you can sign up for the cohort or check it out there. If you're watching this, I will drop the link to the event down below. Just go ahead and click it. It will take you to the page. You can learn a lot more about the work that Shelley and Lavelle are doing and find out who else is coming to the event in the fall. And we'd hope to see you there. Shelley, I just want to again say thank you. This has been great. I really enjoyed getting a chance to chat with you about the work, sort of about your experience, and really about the goal. And I think at the end of the day, it just does come down to that notion of what do we really want from education? What do we really want from the work that we're doing? We want students to have an opportunity. We want families to feel included. And we want our communities to thrive. And so thank you for sharing that message with us. I'm sure we'll talk again real soon, but it's been a blast having you on the podcast today.
One thing you said it well at the end, but, we have, our public schools are a treasure. They are truly a treasure. And I hope that in our work, we can help people see the value and the pride that they should take in our public schools and what they offer for our children.
Beautiful. I think that's a great place for us to end the conversation.
Thank you.
Shelley, great to see you. We'll talk again real soon.
Thank you, Corey.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the RocketPD Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Murray. We hope you found today's conversation insightful. If you enjoyed what you heard, consider clicking that like button and subscribing to our channel. You can download the RocketPD Podcast wherever you find your favorite pods. We're also on YouTube. Just search for RocketPD. At RocketPD, we're on a mission to empower the world's teachers and staff. To learn more about our work and the community we're building together, visit us anytime at RocketPD.com. If you're an educator and you're listening to this, remember, your work matters. So be well, do right, and let's keep up the fight.